Hello and welcome to the second edition of Shamrock Sports Inside the Irish. We're going to talk about all sports except Notre Dame football. I'm David Korzanowski, joined alongside Paul Farrington and Grant Del Vecchio. We have a lot to dive into. We had the first edition of Shamrock Sports, which talked about the Notre Dame Fighting Irish football team and how they're looking heading into 2019. We're going to take a look at the teams that play at Alumni Stadium and around campus. First, guys, I want to start with women's soccer. They're the only fall sports teams with games under their belt, and they've gotten off to a hot start.
Yeah, and I think that most of that hot start can be accredited to the defense of Notre Dame. If you take a look in both the 3 regular season games that they played and the 2 exhibition, I know you're not big on the exhibition games, David, but only 2 goals allowed, one last night against Western Michigan and one coming in the very first exhibition game against Ohio State. You have Jade Gosar and Shannon Hendricks leading that defense, and they've done a really nice job for the Irish, at least through these first 3 games.
Absolutely, and just building off that, heading into this season, the Irish were 17-18 over their past 2 seasons, so not the best for them, but 3-0 start is exactly what they needed. They started 3-0 last year, kind of tailed off towards the middle of the season, but this is exactly the start the Irish needed to get off.
Yeah, Grant, I want to go back to that point you just made. This is a team that went 8-10 last year, a little bit of a disappointing season. First time in their history that they were below 500. They lost to teams like Florida State, Duke, Stanford, all in the top 10. They really didn't put up much of a fight against ranked opponents. What do you think this hot start has meant for them this year?
I think it's given them a little bit of their swagger back.
Sure.
The confidence is up in the locker room, I'm sure, and it's on the field. You can see the girls are out there. They're excited to play, and as Paul mentioned, it's just the defensive effort has been incredible.
I actually do want to say, though, even with the hot start, 3-0 to begin the season, and I know Grant said last year they started the same way, I don't want to be a Debbie Downer, but there's still a lot tougher games coming up in ACC play. We have Florida State, we have the top teams in the country later on in the schedule. Beating St. Louis and beating Western Michigan is nice, but it does get tougher down the road.
No doubt about it. That ACC schedule is absolutely grueling for the Irish. They have 3 tough road games against Duke, UNC, and UVA, all ranked in the preseason top 10. I want to go a little bit game by game and break down each performance. First game of the year against St. Louis, a team that made the NCAA tournament last year. Grant, what did you see from the team in their opener?
Again, defensive battle for most of the way on both sides of the ball. St. Louis played well as the Irish, and they also limited St. Louis to only 4 shots on goal for the entire game. So really the goalkeeping was great and the defensive effort. You just can't speak about it enough.
Sure. Yeah, like you said, the first half was great for the Irish defense. Towards the end was a little bit of a flurry from St. Louis. 9 of their 11 shots came in the second half, all 4 of their corner kicks. So at the end of the game when St. Louis was applying the pressure, the Notre Dame defense and their goalie, Brooke Littman, did a great job to really halt that attack and maintain the 1-0 lead. That
one goal was scored by Sammy Fisher on a penalty kick in the 77th minute following a red card from the St. Louis goalie as she took down Kiki Van Zayten that set up the game winner for Notre Dame. In the second game of the season, they went up against Northwestern, and really the offense exploded. What did you see from Herman Delgado, Paul?
Well, Eva Herm was someone that I actually went to high school with,
so I
was actually pretty excited to see
so you had the scouting report.
She had a great game. Yeah, so I had the scouting report, a couple of years' worth of footage under the belt, but I would say she was definitely the player of the game. She had 2 goals and an assist, and when one of those goals is a corner kick, if you have a goal coming off a corner kick, I think you should almost always be in consideration for player of the game, because you just don't see that very often. Right. So she had a great game, and Delgado, as you said, David, 2 goals from her as well.
Yeah,
pretty good.
Right, absolutely. And I just want to point out that Delgado had 2 goals as well, and she missed the entire 2018 season due to an ACL injury. Yeah. So, yes, Herm played great, 2 goals and an assist, player of the game, but my personal player of the game would be Delgado just because of how she came out, coming off that injury, battling back, and really helping out her team.
Delgado started at that center attack position, netted 2 goals, the first of her college career, as she was sidelined in 2018. A Notre Dame team that was really kind of had a lot of injuries last year that people maybe didn't know about. Nikki Colantano as well, Natalie Ward. So the Irish start off their first 2 games a combined 5-0 against St. Louis and Northwestern. Another point as well, those 2 teams both made the NCAA tournament last year. St. Louis lost in the first round to Kansas 2-1. Northwestern lost 1-0 in the first round to NC State. We did have a game yesterday, and Notre Dame had to come from behind against Western Michigan, a team that maybe wasn't on their radars as much. Who impressed you offensively yesterday? What do you say, Grant?
I would say also I just want to mention before we get
Sure.
into that offensive back, head coach Nate Norman, it was a homecoming
Yeah.
game for him. He was head coach for 4 seasons at Western Michigan. He led the Broncos to MAC titles in 2013 and 2015, so it was good for him to get in there and get a win with his new team.
Yeah.
It's also the first time that Notre Dame trailed all season long, only
Sure.
the third game, but they were down 1-0 in the first half. And to bring your point about the offense, it was great how they responded. Down in the first half,
Right.
kept going, kept getting shots on net, and they really just came out and came back. Got
Yeah,
that
and
2
you saw
goals.
Autumn Smithers had 2 goals in the game. Brooke Van Dyke's been doing a little bit of everything this season. She had an assist as well there. So a good team effort from the defense and offensive side.
Yeah, Van Dyke notched up another assist. Smithers, a graduate student transfer from San Francisco, got her first 2 goals in a Notre Dame uniform. Big question for me when you look at this Notre Dame women's soccer team is the goalkeeper position. You have a battle between Brooke Littman and Maddie Interian. If you look at their stats, they're very similar. They've split time so far through the preseason and the regular season. Who do you see taking the reins going forward, Paul?
I think that's a really difficult question to
Right.
answer, David, because actually, as you said, when you look at the stats, Brooke Littman against St. Louis, 4 saves, no goals allowed. Maddie Interian against Northwestern, 4 saves, no goals allowed. If I had to guess, I'd put my money on Littman being the starter just because she got the notch last night.
Sure.
But I think it's still a toss-up, and we'll have to see what happens going into the 4th game.
Grant?
Right, and only 1 goal allowed in 3 games and 9 total saves between the 2 of them. So
Yeah.
obviously it's a tight race. Littman's a senior, Interian's a sophomore, but really 2 great options for the Irish.
And to go back to the first point that Paul made, the back line in front of them is outstanding. I mean, they have been airtight and really have stymied any shots that these opponents have put up. Western Michigan yesterday, they scored a goal. They only had 5 shots. I do want to shift gears now and look at the men's side out on the pitch at Alumni Stadium. They're getting their season underway soon. Very successful season for the team last year. They made the Elite Eight with thrilling wins in the NCAA tournament against Michigan and UVA. They lost to Indiana, their in-state rival, 1-0 in that Elite Eight game. Grant, I'm going to start with you. What are some key pieces that are missing for Notre Dame this season as they try to repeat that success?
Right. Well, the loss of Patrick Berneski, who was one of the leading goal scorers from last team, is definitely going to pose a little bit of an issue
Yep.
for the Irish. But I think the midfield this year will be the engine for their team. The combination of grad student Felician Dumas, seniors Jack Casey, Spencer Farina, sophomore Mohamed Omar, give a nice experience of both. A nice blend of both experience and youth. And while they are missing key pieces from last year's team, I feel as though Notre Dame men's soccer is going to have another great season.
Yeah, and to build off Grant's point, last season was the first time that the men's team has reached the quarterfinal of the NCAA tournament since 2013.
Yeah.
And I don't think you can ignore the presence, you really can't miss him, of Duncan Turnbull, the goalie for this Notre Dame team.
Huge.
6'7", massive guy. Having him come into goal or returning, it's nice to have your goalie come back and play.
Yeah.
When you have someone like that, someone that big and that good, coming back for another season, you don't know what could happen.
Ryan Kreutz was the goalie for most of last year, but Duncan Turnbull got a few nods, especially in that NCAA tournament game against Michigan. Notre Dame won 12-11 in penalty kicks. That was a thriller. And then that UVA game, Jack Lynn scoring the game-winning goal with 1 second left in the round of 16. Lynn is another guy I have my eye on coming back. He was a freshman last year who notched up 3 goals and 3 assists. But you do have some big names leaving in Thomas Hewlin, Patrick Berneski, and Sean McLeod. And to combine with all of those missing pieces, you have a grueling schedule that Notre Dame men's soccer has to go up against. Paul, who are some matchups that you're looking at there?
Well, I broke down the schedule last night, and
Sure.
I really think that the whole season's going to come down to 2 4-game stretches. So, not to cheat and pick every single ranked match on the schedule. I'm just going to say this first 4-game slate, you have at Indiana, who's number 2 in the country to start the year, at UNC, number 6, at Michigan State, number 7, and then versus Virginia at home, number 12. So you have 3 top 7 matchups within a couple days. It's really within 1 week. So I'm not really going to pick a game. I'd pick Indiana, of course.
Sure.
But those 3 games back to back to back, you really probably can't find a tougher schedule in the country.
No, and that's something that head coach Chad Riley speaks on behalf of his team. One of the bright spots, actually, is that their tough schedule helps them compete at another level and helps them win games in the playoff once the season progresses forward. That's why they're playing such a tough schedule throughout the season, so that once playoff time comes, their team's ready.
8 ranked matchups.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah, Indiana is a team that Notre Dame has had some very close games with going back these past couple years. They obviously lost in the quarterfinal, lost in the regular season to them too in overtime. They play them in September. UNC, you also mentioned, Paul. Then they play Duke in early October. Good thing is, though, Notre Dame was a top 10 team last year with an 11-7-3 record. So it's not like these other sports where you need to be winning 75% of your games. One last point I want to hit on before we move on. Chad Riley takes over the helm last year for a legendary coach, Bobby Clark, and he's been awesome, Grant.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, out of season 2, there's also just one thing I want to bring up. Last spring, our team went to England for spring break and got some great games with some English football clubs out there. Chad Riley got us there. Also in the spring, we beat the Mexico U18 national team 3-2. So out of season, he's also trying to develop his players even further and make sure they're always playing soccer, always got a ball with their feet, you know? And I think that's just one great thing that he's done.
And Grant, I don't think you can expect anything except higher expectations for this team, especially heading into year 2. Give the players another chance to learn Chad Riley's system and grow.
Right, absolutely.
No doubt about it. Second year at the helm for Riley, and he followed in the same footsteps as Bobby Clark. Graduated Notre Dame, and then he coached at Dartmouth. The legendary coach for Notre Dame, he coached at Dartmouth before he came to South Bend. So he clearly knew who he was picking for his replacement, in this Notre Dame soccer team on the men's side of the ball should be looking very good in 2019. A team with maybe some more question marks who gets their season going this weekend is the volleyball team, with Coach Brian Johnson at the helm. They get going against LaSalle, Wright State, and Bowling Green in the Golden Dome Invitational last year, 18-12, 10-8 in conference. Let's talk about those first matchups this weekend, Grant.
Yeah, absolutely. So Notre Dame has a combined record of 13-3 against this year's Golden Dome Invitational field. So as you said, Wright State, LaSalle, and Bowling Green. They're also 7-0 all-time record at home against these opponents. So they're just looking to get off to another hot start and really propel this season forward.
Yeah, and as you guys know me, I'm looking forward to volleyball season all year long. So heading into this Golden Dome Invitational, as you said, 7-0 against these teams, LaSalle, Wright State, and Bowling Green. You can't expect anything except perhaps a clean sweep for the Irish.
Hopefully.
Even though that might be a lot to ask.
That would be a lot to ask. Let's talk about some of the losses for the volleyball team as well. I want to focus particularly on Ryan DeGerald at libero. Program leader in digs, and then all of a sudden she hits the curb. She graduates.
Yeah, no, it's definitely going to be a tough loss for the Irish. But when you have guys, or girls, I should say, like Sydney Bent and Charlie Nigo and Zoe Nunez coming back for another season, all three of them were on the ACC second team last year. Those three coming back, you really have a lot of room for growth. And I think Nigo might actually be the best player on this team.
Absolutely, and all three of those girls you just named were also named to the preseason All-ACC team. Notre Dame got the second most picks in that category. Speaking on Nigo, you just said she started in 26 contests last season and appeared in all 28 matches. She led the team with 339 kills and finished the season with 10-plus kills in 8 straight matches. So look for her to do some work again this season.
Bent as well had 270 kills. I want to go back to that libero position. Madeline Cruzado comes in. She had 220 digs last year, and Johnson's likely looking to her to fill the shoes that DeGerald left. Do you think she can do it?
I think there's a good chance that she could do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. We take a look at that schedule as well for Notre Dame. They have a tough schedule in the ACC. Going up against Pitt on October 25th. They were 17-1 in conference last year. Notre Dame picked to finish 4th in the ACC in the preseason. Last year they were 6th in the conference, but they have a lot of youth. Grant, where do you see them finishing in the ACC this year?
I would say upper half, guaranteed. I think they're going to have an even better season than they did last year. It's just they had a lot of young players playing last year and performing well, and now there's just another added year of experience. But one thing I will mention is that while Notre Dame has been successful against the teams that are coming here this weekend, all 3 teams traveling here this weekend recorded at least 15 wins last season. And Bowling Green had 19 victories. They had a 9-2 record posted on the road. So although we are expecting Notre Dame to have a clean sweep, so to speak, it's not going to be so much of a cakewalk.
Right, and Coach Johnson also talked about the fact that he's not measuring success right now at wins or losses. It's how the team looks and how these younger players going forward come out in this first weekend before they get going in ACC play. That's kind of a common theme we see with a lot of these fall sports. Maybe the first couple opponents aren't the best you'll play all year, but that's how you get yourself in better shape going into conference play. We'll shift gears to a winter sport, actually. Michaela Mabry just announced as the new assistant coach for Notre Dame. That announcement coming just a few days ago on August 26th. She fills in for Niele Ivey, who becomes an assistant coach for the Memphis Grizzlies and just the 9th female coach in the history of the NBA. Grant, I'll start with you. Mabry, a graduate of the program herself with a couple siblings who are just as good, if not better. What does she bring to the table for Notre Dame?
Mabry herself played in 3 Final Fours, and she was part of the winningest class in Notre Dame women's basketball history. So she brings that experience of knowing how to win and knowing how to relate to the players. I think that's one thing that Coach McGraw, who encouraged Mabry to seek out coaching positions and now brought her back onto her own staff. That's the thing she stresses, that she was a leader on the court when she was a player, and now she'll be able to lead from the bench, and she just can relate to the players really well. And she has some of her own experience. She spent a season at Miami of Florida, at Miami of Ohio, and last season she was director of recruiting at LSU. And so while she did graduate recently, she got some much-needed experience under her belt before coming back to
And as you said, Grant, talking about Mabry being a leader, 2-year starting point guard, 2-year captain of this Irish team. And something that Muffet McGraw was actually having a laugh about when talking with the media about the hire is that Mabry's going to be in charge of a lot of recruiting programs for the Irish, and that she could bring a sort of the younger element that Ivy, as great of a coach as she was, might not have been able to do. Where Mabry, just recently, 2016, she graduated, she might actually know some of these recruits coming in. And with her sister, especially Marina, just having been here, you actually have a chance to have someone who could personally know some of these high recruit players.
Yeah,
most certainly.
Samantha Brunell, a high recruit who comes in this year for her freshman campaign. And Notre Dame's going to need some good coaching because they had so many players graduate this year. Arike Gumbawale, Marina Mabry, and Jackie Young already tearing it up in the WNBA. How does this Notre Dame Fighting Irish team go back and compete, maybe not for a national championship, but to be at the top or half of the ACC this year?
I think you just got to stick with the system that you've been in for the past 20 years. You just have to allow Coach McGraw to train her players the way she has. I know, as you said, Agumbawale last night at 35 points became the first rookie ever in WNBA history to have 2 35-point games.
Yeah.
So with losing players like her and Jackie Young, the #1 overall pick, I think that to expect a national championship, like you said, would be a lot. But if you just let Coach McGraw have her way with the players next year and the year after.
Sure.
Absolutely. And Coach McGraw and the entire Irish coaching staff has just created such a good culture of winning and perfection at this school that while we do have the big losses that you mentioned, David, I think that this team is really just going to come together and they're going to find a way to get it done because that's just what the Irish do.
The Notre Dame Fighting Irish graduated all 5 of their starters this past year, and they were all drafted in the first couple rounds of the WNBA draft. Michaela Mabry comes back to South Bend, fills in for Niele Ivey, and how about that accomplishment for her, becoming the 9th female coach in the history of the WNBA? That's impressive as well. Before we wrap up, I want to do some quick hitters. I'll leave it open-ended for you guys. So we talked about women's soccer, we talked about men's soccer, volleyball, and then we touched on the winter sports a little bit. What are you guys most excited to watch for Notre Dame athletics this fall outside of football?
Outside of football, and I'm guessing outside of men's basketball too, we're gonna say?
You can throw them in there if you want. We haven't talked about them that much.
I am excited. Excited might be a strong word for men's basketball this year. I am intrigued as to what will happen with this team. Losing DJ Harvey could probably be replaced fairly easily. But I think that this team, this Notre Dame team, if they come in last, it'll be very disappointing.
I would agree that coming in last would be disappointing.
But extremely. Notre Dame
Not
should
just
never,
disappointing,
should never be
extremely
coming in last
disappointing,
in the
right.
ACC, especially when you have teams like Georgia Tech and
So you're most excited.
I'm most excited to see our team not finish in last.
Got it. Grant.
I would say that I'm excited for all the sports because I think they're going to be great. I think men's soccer is going to have another fantastic season, hopefully get past that quarterfinal round. And men's basketball, I'm extremely excited. I think we got our young guys just gaining more experience. The youthfulness of the team is probably the biggest positive, and I think it's only up from where last year was.
Do you think there's a shot at the tournament this year?
Absolutely.
Men's basketball.
Absolutely.
Explain.
It's a hot take.
There's nothing to explain. You asked if I think I have a shot. Yeah, absolutely. Seriously.
All right, so Notre Dame men's basketball with a shot to make the NCAA tournament.
Doesn't every team have a shot?
Does Notre Dame women's basketball, can they get back to the Final Four?
I'd say there's no reason they can't.
No reason they can't, and with that, we will wrap up Inside the Irish Shamrock Sports Edition. Thanks for joining us on this Friday afternoon. For Grant and Paul, I'm David Korzanowski. We'll see you next week.